it's a great pleasure to introduce the cast and the crew. First, producer Kevin Loader, director Nicholas Hytner, the lady in the van herself, Maggie Smith, writer Alan Bennett, and the other Alan Bennett, Alex Jennings. We'll be adding another tea, Alan, in post. One of the most striking things about this film is, of course, that it's a true story. But watching it again, one of the things that spoke to me most was the fact that it's filmed in the actual location in which it took place. Nick, how important was it to be there in Gloucester Crescent?
Well, it certainly has an element of authenticity to the film, and since we never considered doing it anywhere else, I'm not sure I can quite imagine or visualize what it would have been like. It was entertaining to see the look on all the residents' face, many of whom were there when all this happened, when the van drove down the Crescent again. I think they had mixed feelings about that. And it was also very entertaining to talk to them about Miss Shepherd and about Alan. You could have made a kind of Rashomon movie about the various different versions they had of her, although on the essentials they were all in agreement.
And authenticity is, Alex, presumably that's important for you to be in the real location.
Yeah, hugely. I mean, it was amazing to be sitting at his desk in his window with the van back in the driveway. Immense help with your imagination.
Alan, a question not really as a writer, but more as a householder. What was it like to have a film crew coming back into that house, which I believe you still own?
Well, I don't live there. If I'd lived there, it would have been a nightmare. But I've never had a film crew in any place I've lived, because with the best will in the world, they always cause chaos. But I didn't live there. Anthony Croller, the photographer, lives there. It's different from when I lived there anyway, so I didn't have any sort of pangs about it, and I was very glad. If we hadn't had the house, I don't suppose we'd have been able to make the film, so it's a very good thing we did. And
of course, the house is only part of the story. Maggie, you spend more of the time in the van than in the house. How was that?
Well, they were in luxury. They were actually in a real house. No, the van wasn't the most comfortable place, but it was where I spent most of the time, I must admit. But they were all in comfort.
So,
figures, doesn't it?
Kevin, we've heard the valid creative reasons for doing all this, but you were the man who had to make it happen. How easy was it? And tell us a little bit about Gloucester Crescent itself and the importance in the story.
Gloucester Crescent's kind of a unique street, really, in Camden. Obviously, Alan knows far more than I do, but it's kind of sandwiched between, Regent's Park and the railway line, and the kind of ever-moving stream of urban activity that is Camden High Street and Market. So it's this little oasis, really, and when Alan lived there, and indeed now, it seems to be inhabited by quite creative, liberal-minded, quite well-off, but kindly people, and therefore they tolerated Miss Shepherd for many years, and they tolerated us, I'm happy to say.
Well, let's talk to some other creative, well-meaning, liberal and well-paid people. Gentlemen, down at the front.
Hello, everybody. Simon Button, UK Freelance. Question for Maggie. How was it revisiting this character that you played on stage, I think it was 15 years ago? And also, how method did you go in terms of immersing yourself in the squalor of it all?
How what?
How method did you go in terms of immersing yourself in the squalor?
What method?
How method were you?
Method?
Yeah, method.
Right. Well, not a lot of that is required if you are dressed as I was and in a van. That was method enough. I really didn't go in. You mean into the inner whatnot? No, I didn't dare do that. I just kept thinking about her. Sorry?
And how was it revisiting her after so many years, going back to
I can't hear a word.
How was it revisiting the part after 15 years since
Oh,
you did it on stage?
it was very, very different. Very different, because on stage it was much broader, and but the film was much more concentrated. It was a whole different thing.
But they were both physically demanding, weren't they? I mean, the stage as well.
The stage was more demanding because, yeah. But and it was a long time ago, and I could handle it. But it just wasn't very easy, the being constricted by the van. But I did go out and about, though. I just wasn't in a house very often.
Lady at the front.
Hi, Laura Jones for Soho Picture Book. A question to Maggie and Alan. It's very much a tale of human compassion that plays on...
I'm so sorry. Do you think we could possibly have the microphone working? I think we may need to swap.
I don't know whether it might be easier to hear.
Call that first one a rehearsal.
Hello.
Right.
Yeah, you can hear me now. It's all good.
Yeah.
Hello, Laura Jones for Soho Picture Book, to Maggie and Alan. It's a lovely story which is very much a tale of human compassion that demonstrates the whole love thy neighbour proverb, set in a time when people did know who lived next door to them. But in a day and age where people aren't quite as kind and don't know their next door neighbours, what do you think this says to a modern audience about care of the elderly and those around you?
Well, it seems sorry, you...
No, go on.
I was just going to say, it's extraordinary. This happened to one person. There seem to be thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are looking for somewhere to live. This is just one single person. And I don't know whether today it would happen. I really don't. I don't think it would happen to you again, would it?
I hope not.
No.
But I don't think compassion isn't the right word. I mean, I'm always having to say this. It wasn't compassion in quite that way. If somebody had said to me, if you let her into the garden, she's going to be there for 15 years, I would never have had her in there, obviously. But the reason why she came into the garden was because I could see her from where I worked was, say, at this table, and when she was parked in the street, she would be about the second row of the audience. And so I could see everything that happened. And people did used to rough her up, and kids used to persecute her, and people in the market did. And you always had to have one eye on the lookout for anything happening to her. Now, I was trying to work, and you can't work like that. And in the end, it was simply a case of self-preservation, from my point of view, that she came in because I wanted to get on with my work, and if she was in the garden, she'd be out of the way. So it's the reverse of compassion from my point of view.
Garth.
Hello, my name is Garth Pierce, and I work for whoever pays me. Can I ask a personal question of Dame Maggie and Alan? Your respective ages are a matter of record, and yet your energy level is enormous. How do you keep that up? Is it diet? Is it attitude? Is it some secret? Or just give me some hope?
How do you keep it up?
I think the only thing that makes me not look my age is my hair. Otherwise, I feel every minute of my 81 years.
All that work you've had.
What?
All that work you've had.
Yeah, it's a blessing to be able to go on working. I mean, and to also, well, for both of us, for the public still has an appetite for what we do. playwrights particularly have a quite a short life. That they often have a vogue, and then they go out. People go off them, and that's it. And I'm very lucky in that people still want to read the stuff I write. And I suppose Maggie sees the stuff that you do.
Well, yes, I mean, I'm very lucky because there's always this endless thing about there aren't any parts for women over a certain age. Well, I've kind of reached the limit now because I'm sure there aren't many after the age I am, but I think they're talking about a middle age. But I don't know what the energy thing is. The energy comes from the people who are around you and one's director. And a lot of energy came from Nick to get us through. But it is tough, and I can't say it's easy at the age I am. I'm not speaking for you because you're okay. Well, because he's always on a bicycle and things, you know.
Well, I used to watch you and think, well, I couldn't do that, and you were doing stuff that I would never have been able to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could do it anymore.
Well,
not really.
Well,
but
No,
who knows?
It was sometimes a tricky call as to whether I could ask you to climb into the van yet again for yet another take.
When it was dry, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
When it was wet most of the time because of the rain.
but there's a scene where Maggie's where Miss Shepherd is at mass, and she has to. Miss Shepherd was very devout, and the former devotion took was to actually prostrate herself before she received the host, and I think we did 3 or 4 takes on that, and you did those takes, and I couldn't have done one of them. So
I'll tell you one morning when I didn't dare ask you to climb into the van was on a Monday morning. The van was parked outside the house through the weekend, and you know Camden Town is party central on Saturday, and it turned out through Sunday night. When they turned up first thing Monday morning to reopen the van, they found a couple of people who'd been having a good time with each other and with whatever substances they'd in the van. They'd apparently been there all weekend. And when I arrived, when I arrived a little later, they were evacuating the van of all its filthy contents, which were obviously just kind of fake filthy. They were art department filthy, to have them deep cleaned because they had no idea what these 2 youngsters who were flat out in the back of the van had been doing through the weekend. And they all had to get deep cleaned and then made filthy again. And I had to keep from Maggie why we suddenly were swapping the schedule for the whole day round, because I never dared say that you'll now be occupying a van that has been occupied by 2 people who have been indulging in various activities, legal and illegal, right through the weekend. So that's...
No, I was told much later. Cowards, they were.
That's a different sort of centerpiece gala. Lady at the front.
Hello, Eva Přivřelová from Czech Daily E15. I have a question for Mr. Bennett, because this is the 4th version of Lady in the Van, for different media. So is there, when you revive the story for the script, is there always something new that you find out about Miss Shepherd, or has your opinion or feelings of her kind of evolved?
Has your views and opinions of Miss Shepherd changed with the different versions of the story that you've written? Have you found out more about her?
No, I don't think so, not in the sense that she was... as a person, she was unreachable. So the fact, if I'd known that she'd been a very good pianist, for instance, or she'd studied with Cortot, as I found out after she died, I couldn't have talked to her about that, because she just wouldn't. It wouldn't come back. You know, she'd say, "I don't want to know," or she would just shut up shop and stop talking. So in that sense, she remained unreachable, I think. But it made her seem and I think I said this in the original book, after she died and I found out about her, it made her life seem much more adventurous and much more eventful than my own, really, which would have pleased her no end, I'm quite sure. But I don't think my attitude to her has changed. People tend to think of her as being a sweet old lady. She was not that, and she wouldn't have survived had she been, a much more kindly person. And
Alex, although the title, of course, is The Lady in the Van and Miss Shepherd is at the centre of it, it's also a story about Alan and the writing. You've played Alan before, haven't you? Tell me a little bit about becoming Alan Bennett.
Well, I have. I played him in 2 short pieces that Alan wrote. One was a kind of concert piece that he wrote with the Medici String Quartet about his sort of musical memories of going to concerts and churches growing up in Leeds. And the string quartet wanted to revive it 4 or 5 years ago. Alan didn't want to do it again and suggested that I do it. So that was the first time that I kind of dusted off my Alan Bennett, which many of us kind of do around the kitchen. And then he wrote a play to accompany that happened at the National Cocktail Sticks, which was about Alan and his parents. And came to all the rehearsals, and so I had, I had Alan to sort of watch and be told what to do by. And he always wanted me, Alan wants me to be tougher than I perhaps sometimes was. And I also, for the movie, had to kind of butch up because he has shoulders and I don't. So they had to kind of make me wider to be Alan Bennett. And you watch and listen, and a lot of the clues are in the words and the rhythm of his writing. So yeah, it's a bit weird.
The consensus is that in the piece, him, that Alan did first and you did second, you were a great deal better as Alan Bennett than Alan Bennett was as himself.
I don't know about that. But Alan, I mean, that's you're used now to seeing yourself on stage, but to see yourself in your house must have been a rather strange when you visited the set, when you watched the film now. Is that a strange sensation?
No, occasionally when I was, we used it as a green room as well as for shooting. And sometimes when I was sitting there and saw Alex pass the door, that seemed quite weird, really. But, when you're not thinking about it. But he's more socially adept than I am, I think. Is that right?
They got my hair right for the film, which they hadn't done for the stage version.
Yes, he was a bit too Veronica Lake on the stage, wasn't it?
Lady there.
Xenia, cinemafia.ru. I have a question to Maggie Smith. Watching The Lady in Van, I couldn't remember your previous character, outstanding, Lady Violet Crowley. And for you, whose life more adventurous and preferable seems to you? And in your real life, for who you're closer, to Lady Violet Crowley or to Miss Shepherd?
Which one I'm close to? I'm not very close to either. I think curiously, I feel easier with the lady in the van than with that lady with the hat on. It was much easier to. I can only talk as an actress. It was much easier to be Miss Shepherd because she didn't mind how she looked, and it was such a relief because Lady Violet was forever in those corsets and things that Miss Shepherd would never have dreamed of going near. So for comfort alone, it was nicer to be Miss Shepherd. That's as much of your question as I managed to hear.
A question for Alan Bennett. How did Miss Shepherd get the money to buy so many vans?
The first replacement van was a gift from somebody called Lady Wiggin, who was, Miss Shepherd was Catholic, very Catholic, and Lady Wiggin was Catholic, and I think it was somehow that connection which commended Miss Shepherd to her. And she lived round the corner in Regent's Park Terrace, and she occurs in the film rather slightly libelously, but because Lady Wiggin was very sympathetic to Miss Shepherd, whereas Lady Wiggin in the film is rather sort of keeps her at arm's length. But she gave Miss Shepherd the van, but I did say to her, well, couldn't the van be left outside your house? And she said, oh no. And Regent's Park Terrace is rather grander than Gloucester Crescent. So that was the first van. The second van, I don't know how she had. You see, she didn't really have any expenses. She didn't have any rent to pay. I ran electric out from the house, but she didn't have any bills. But, and she had an address, which means that she'd get more social security. So she actually had some money. When she died, she had £6,000 in a building society. So she would be able to, afford a van. But I never asked her that. And it wasn't simply a van. It was she also then bought a rather Only Fools and Horses type three-wheeler. What are they called? Reliant, yeah.
Robin Reliant.
Yeah. But I mean, she didn't care about money, and money was never a problem. And to the extent that when she died, and I had to go through the van, there was about £600 trodden into all the muck and filth on the floor of the van. So.
And Nick, you've worked with Alan over many projects and many years. Did you visit the house during this time? Did you meet Miss Shepherd?
I first visited to talk to Alan about the first thing we did together about a few months after Miss Shepherd died. I used to walk past a lot because I always lived in that area, and I used to try and work out who lived where. And I did know Alan lived at 23, and I had no idea what the van and the old lady were about. I do remember thinking once, does he keep his mother in a van? I mean, I dismissed that thought. But when I went, finally, to talk about The Wind in the Willows, which Alan was going to adapt and I was going to direct as a children's show, Christmas show at the National Theatre back in 1990. So it must have been a matter of months after Miss Shepherd died. And I didn't ask what was that van that was there all those years, because you don't. You're English, you're polite. And then when finally I found out about it the same time as everybody else did when Alan first published his diary about her in the London Review of Books, and discovered that even when the van was in the drive, Alan writes that people used to visit him and were too polite to say, what is that van and who is that old lady who are in your drive? So I was no different from anybody else.
At least you managed to keep your shoes clean. One of the most powerful scenes for me is... anyway, gentleman there.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm a German film critic, and this film is much about finding a home or having a home. And with all these refugees on the run these days, what does home mean to you? This question goes out to everyone.
To me? To all of you.
All of us.
What does home mean to me? Yeah. I'm so glad I've got one. It means, having had a practice at not having one, it means an awful lot. I don't know where, there is no way you could live in a van. I don't think. I know people do. Some people live in cars, but surely not for that length of time. I've lived in my home for a very long time, and I dread to think what it would be like without it. It means everything.
Kevin, you're a British producer and therefore can probably only afford a van.
Well, exactly. Well, actually, you can't afford those vans now. Miss Shepherd certainly wouldn't be able to buy one now because they were all beautifully restored when we bought them, and then we had to return them to this rather terrible state. So the poor van enthusiasts who spent so long in restoring them would be heartbroken, I think, to see what happened to them. Well, I think the film really, it's about being part of a community, isn't it? And however begrudging the community of Gloucester Crescent and indeed Alan himself might from time to time have felt. I mean, you know, she did feel she belonged there somehow, I think, for a large part of her life. And that's all any of us could ever want, is to feel part of a community.
Alex, home, what home means to you?
As Maggie says, you know, just immensely lucky and fortunate to live the life that I'm living with family and a house to live in when you're flooded by the kind of pictures that we're seeing at the moment. It's unimaginable what some people have to go through. Very, very lucky.
Alan, home, thoughts?
Well, obviously, one is very lucky. I see parallels between Miss Shepherd and our own household in the sense that both my partner and I accumulate stuff, and it's not in the least bit chaotic like the van was, but nevertheless, Miss Shepherd used to accumulate stuff and which she didn't use, and this was no different in a way from I'm going to say a normal person, from a person leading a normal life. For instance, one of the things in the van after she died was one of those panels on which her brushes and kitchen implements and so on, which are meant for display in a kitchen. And I remember my mother having one, and we never using the actual implements on this. And similarly it was with Miss Shepherd. She bought this. There was no way she would be using the brushes and the various kitchen implements, the life she led, but she somehow saw herself as leading that kind of life, or maybe leading that kind of life one day. So in a sense she was not so remote from ordinary life as one thinks.
And Nick, final thought on home and the themes of the film?
Well, I don't know that this is the theme of the film at all, but three of my grandparents were what would now be called with a cold lip migrants. And home for me is underpinned by the knowledge that it could all have been incredibly different. And I feel very lucky.
Well, we must let you get back to those homes. Filmmakers, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.